Hello, hello students. This is Dr. Srinivas. In last class, we have dealt with the anatomy of the neck spaces. Today, we'll deal with the infections. Before starting, can you please confirm if you're hearing my voice clearly? Just reply in the chat. If not, I'll remove the mask. At any moment in the class, if you are not able to hear clearly, just message me so that I will know. If you are all set here and if everyone is ready, we'll start the class. Just reply. Shall we start? Okay then. So in the last class, we have dealt with the anatomy of the neck spaces. Today we'll deal with the pathology, that is the infections of the deep neck spaces. So the classification of the neck spaces. Last class we have dealt with the classification of the neck spaces, and the classification of infection is also the same because these infections are nothing but infections of those spaces. So broadly they are classified into abscesses involving the entire neck, abscesses above the hyoid bone and below the hyoid bone. Today we'll start with the superficial space infection. It is known as the necrotizing fasciitis. Necrotizing fasciitis. Necrotizing fasciitis is the infection of the superficial space. So, how is the superficial space formed? The superficial space is formed by the superficial layer of the cervical fascia. It creates a potential space containing the fibrofatty tissue above the platysma and also below the platysma. So the potential space on superficial and deep to the platysma covered by the superficial layer of the cervical fascia is known as the superficial neck space, and the infection of this space is known as necrotizing fasciitis. This necrotizing fasciitis was initially described by a scientist known as Melanie, but the name is coined by a scientist known as Wilson. Okay, this necrotizing fasciitis is nothing but a infection of the superficial space causing necrosis of the fascia, subcutaneous tissue, and also muscle in the late stages. So coming to etiology, what is the etiology of this space infection? The etiology is the dental infections, superficial skin trauma, dental infections, skin trauma, quinsy, that is peritonsillar abscess, and parapharyngeal abscess. These are the possible etiologies for necrotizing fasciitis of neck. Necrotizing fasciitis can occur anywhere in the body, but right now we are more concerned about the neck. Now coming to bacteriology, the most common bacteria involved is beta hemolytic streptococcus, staphylococcus aureus, and anaerobes. It is important because it's a potentially a polymicrobial infection containing a mixture of gram-positive, gram-negative, and anaerobic bacteria. Okay. So how does it present? Clinically, the lesion of this necrotizing fasciitis contains a outer zone of erythema, intermediate zone of ecchymosis, tender ecchymosis, and central zone of vesiculation, which these vesicles break, they form crust, and finally necrosis and ulceration. See, this is the outer zone of erythema, central or middle zone of dusky tender zone, and centrally a zone of necrosis. This is seen in initial 36 to 72 hours. Later, there will be vesiculation and surgical emphysema. Okay. In the early stages, the lesion looks like this. See, early stages there is erythema. Okay. Later, there will be central necrosis. So the speed of the spread of this infection is directly proportional to the thickness of the subcutaneous layer, because this infection moves through the facial planes. So if you see the skin, if you see this lesion, if there is skin necrosis of say 5 centimeter, it doesn't mean that the subcutaneous facial plane is involved at the same level. The level which the subcutaneous and the facial planes involve is more than the involvement of the skin. That we have to keep in mind. Okay. The next important thing is, see that this is what I want to mention. The facial necrosis extends beyond the skin necrosis. These patients are also present with skin anesthesia because it is due to the damage of subcutaneous nerves, and soft tissue crepitus. What do you mean by crepitus? Crepitus is nothing but a sound similar to when you press or crush a dried leaf. The sound that emanates when you crush a dried leaf is known as crepitus. Similar sound can be heard while palpating this area because of subcutaneous gas collection, which is known as subcutaneous emphysema. Okay. Apart from this, they have systemic changes like hypocalcemia, hyponatremia, and dehydration. So we have to keep in mind and we have to correct it. Okay. Now coming to investigation. When you take a CT, you can see this soft tissue, enhanced soft tissue shadow with gas, because they have the etiology, the bacteriology includes aerobic and anaerobic bacteria. Okay. But this gas shadows you can only see in the early stages of the disease. Now coming to management. How do you treat this case? Initially, we have to correct the fluid, because we know the systemic abnormalities, there may be dehydration and also hypocalcemia and hyponatremia. So we have to correct them first. Then antibiotics, IV ampicillin, gentamicin, and clindamycin. Now coming to surgical treatment. The surgical treatment includes radical debridement. Debridement means removal of the unhealthy tissue or necrotic tissue. This is done in the presence, this is done or indicated if there is subcutaneous emphysema or there is progressive infection despite 2 days of medical therapy. You started medical therapy, but there is no change. Then you have to go for debridement. And also there is obvious fluctuation, means there is some abscess along with skin necrosis. In this condition also you should go for debridement. So after debriding, there will be a huge raw area like this. You will debride until you see the normal tissue. Since till then you will debride. But after debriding, you are left with huge raw area. To treat this, you will go for skin grafting. Okay, you go for skin grafting. So after healing, the wound looks like this, similar to this. Now coming to poor prognostic factors. So if the patient is diabetic, has chronic renal failure, or another immunosuppressive conditions, there is poor prognosis. Now coming to complications. If you leave this condition without treating, what happens? This infection from neck spreads into the chest because it spreads through the subfacial, the facial planes, that is subcutaneous planes. First, necrosis of the chest wall fascia. Ultimately, it can cause mediastinitis and other lung infection. Okay, so we have to identify and treat it in the early stages itself. Okay, so you can hear me clearly, right? Are you able to understand? My voice is crisp and clear, right? What about the volume? Is it adequate? Please reply. Okay, good then. Now coming to Ludwig's angina. So Ludwig's angina is nothing but this submandibular and sublingual space infections are together known as Ludwig's angina. It's an important question for you. Okay. So what is this Ludwig's angina? It is nothing but rapidly progressive polymicrobial, similar to the necrotizing fasciitis. Polymicrobial cellulitis of sublingual, submaxillary or submandibular or submylohyoid space with potentially life-threatening airway compromise. I'll tell you how does it compromise with the airway in the further slide. So it is nothing but the infection of sublingual and submaxillary spaces. So now coming to, as in last class you asked me to revise the little bit of anatomy, I'm doing that. So now coming to submandibular space. What is submandibular space? It is nothing but a space bounded anterolaterally by the mandible, medially by the underbelly of the digastric, posteriorly by submandibular gland, and inferiorly it extends up to the level of the hyoid bone. This space is further divided into two spaces by mylohyoid muscle. The space above the mylohyoid is known as sublingual space. The space below mylohyoid is known as submaxillary space. Now coming to contents. What are the contents of the space? Submandibular salivary gland and lymph nodes. So now coming to what is the etiology? What causes this Ludwig's angina? So the most predominant cause is dental or periodontal infection. It causes 80% of the Ludwig's angina. The cause is poor dental hygiene, which include dental caries and dental abscesses, and it can occur post tooth extraction of the lower jaw molars and premolars. Why only molars and why not incisors and canines? Because the roots of the premolars and molars are closely related to these spaces. Look at this diagram. See, these are the premolars and molars. They are closely related to these spaces. This is the mylohyoid line. Above this is sublingual space. Below this is submandibular space. You can see the root of this premolar is related to the sublingual space. So if this tooth is involved, it leads into sublingual abscess initially. If the root of this second and third molars are involved, then it causes the submandibular abscess. See, the roots of premolars and first molar lie above the mylohyoid, so they can cause sublingual space infection. The roots of second and third molar lie below the mylohyoid, so whenever they are involved, they can cause submaxillary space infection. So other less common causes are submandibular silidinitis, and trauma to the floor of the mouth and mandibular fractures. These also can cause this submandibular space infections or Ludwig's angina. So we look at in this diagram. This is the mylohyoid, and the space above it. Okay, this is the sublingual space, and below this is submandibular space. This is submandibular gland. This is the sublingual gland. Okay. Now coming to causative organisms. The most, as it is a mixed infection, the most commonest organisms are Streptococcus pyogenes, Streptococcus viridans, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Staphylococcus aureus, Fusobacterium, Bacteroides, and Peptostreptococcus. These are anaerobic bacteria, and these are also normal commensals. They are present normally in your mouth. Okay, so these are the commonest organisms. These are anaerobic. Now coming to clinical features. How does the patient present to you? The patient presents with a history of pre-existing toothache or tooth extraction. Patient has fever, odynophagia, that is painful swallowing, drooling of saliva. These are the common symptoms. Along with this, the patient has a toxic look on his face. So if sublingual space is involved, there will be swelling in the floor of the mouth. Whenever there is swelling in the floor of the mouth, it pushes the tongue upwards. Okay? If submandibular space infection is involved, there will be brawny or woody tender feeling below the chin. Along with this, there is trismus. What is trismus? Trismus is difficulty in opening the mouth. Difficulty in opening the mouth. Now coming to next symptomatology, stridor. Stridor is noisy breathing. It occurs due to obstruction in the airway. What is the cause of the obstruction? Yes, elevation of the tongue causing decrease in the airway, and also laryngeal edema due to the infection process itself. Initially, there will only be cellulitis. Cellulitis is tissue space inflammation. Initially, there will be only inflammation. Then it is known as cellulitis. There will not be any pus. If we don't treat at this stage, this will progress into pus, that is abscess. Okay. As I told you before, if there is sublingual space infection, this is a sublingual space. This is submandibular space. If this space is infected and filled with pus, it pushes the tongue upwards. Then there will be decrease in the airway, causing stridor and also difficulty in breathing. If this edema spreads downwards into the larynx, it can cause decrease in space and also cause stridor. This is known as laryngeal edema. Okay. See, there is infection of sublingual space. The tongue is pushed upwards. There is no space for the air to go. Okay, the patient presents with stridor and difficulty in breathing. This is a life-threatening situation. What we have to do? We should ensure an airway, because the air is not able to go in this direction. We'll do a tracheostomy so that air will go through this tube. Okay. See, this is the submandibular swelling. Can you appreciate in this lateral area? Lateral photo. These are further increases in adults. Look at this swelling. Okay. So So if you take an X-ray in this case, in early stages of the disease, you can find this swelling, the soft tissue shadow, along with this air. You can see this air, right? This is due to the bacterial infection. During the infection process, the bacteria release gases. They get accumulated in this space. This is one of the indications to diagnose the submandibular neck space infection. And you also can go for CT. CT also you can see this air space. This is the mandible below this cut. This is an axial section. Axial section. You can see the soft tissue shadow. Now coming to treatment of Ludwig's angina. So before that, we have to know that abscess anywhere in the body, the treatment is always incision and drainage followed by antibiotics. Remember that. We'll follow the same thing here also. So if the patient presents with the above symptoms along with toxicity, that is toxic look on his face, to decrease the toxicity and to relieve some amount of the symptoms, we'll start with antibiotics. Broad spectrum antibiotics and with anaerobic coverage. You know, metronidazole PD for anaerobic bacteria. Okay, along with clindamycin for MRSA, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. You can use clindamycin. So the next another important thing is to maintain the airway. There are two ways to maintain the airway. Either you intubate the patient or you do tracheostomy. Next is, as I told you before, the main treatment, that is incision and drainage. Okay. For sublingual space infection, that is only if sublingual space is involved, you can give an incision intraorally, that is through the mouth. This is the intraoral. You ask the patient to open the mouth, give the incision parallel to sublingual duct and also lingual nerve. You don't want to give like this so that you don't injure the important structures. You always give parallel and drain the abscess. If the submaxillary space is involved, you will give an incision in the neck, that is transcervical approach, that is through the neck. We will give an incision from one angle of the mandible here to here, a constant incision. But if the patient presents with, like in this condition, you want to give a liberal incision like this to drain. But if the swelling is localized, you can give a smaller incision also. So you will start from one angle to the other by leaving a 2-finger breadth space below the margin of the mandible, to prevent injury to the facial artery. The facial artery takes a curve at the mandibular margin. You don't want to injure that. Okay. So you give an incision and drain the abscess. So you will see if there is any dehydration, you should give IV fluids. We will continue with the antibiotics obviously, and we have to assess the patient regularly to see if there is any airway compromise. That is more important here, and that is the airway compromise is life-threatening in this condition. So this is, see, for submandibular abscess, it is in books it is given, you should give a liberal incision from here to here. But if the swelling is localized, you can give multiple incision here to the on either side of the angle of the mandible, and you can drain it initially, and you can insert a rubber drain so that it drains constantly. This area in the midline, is an external approach for sublingual space abscess. So sublingual space can be drained in two ways, either intraorally or externally. Okay? And you have to remember that if this Ludwig's angina is in the cellulitis phase, even if you give a liberal incision, there will not be any liquid coming out because it is still in the cellulitis phase. But what by giving this incision, you will decrease the tension in that space, in the tissue space, and the symptoms will gradually improve. If there is an abscess in that area, immediately after giving incision, the pus comes out. Okay. So what happens if we don't treat in this case? It will lead to parapharyngeal and retropharyngeal space abscesses, airway obstruction due to pushing back of the tongue, and laryngeal edema can occur. Aspiration pneumonia. The patient can swallow his own secretions, aspirate his own secretions, and cause and lead to pneumonia. Septicemia, that is initially the bacteria they enter the blood causing bacteremia, and septicemia means it involves the multiple organs, and finally death. This is the sequelae. This is the sequelae if you don't treat the patient in a timely manner. Now coming to retropharyngeal abscess. Retropharyngeal space, as we talked in the previous class, is bounded superiorly by the skull base. Below, it reaches up to the level of the mediastinum, that is T1, T2. Anteriorly, it is bounded by buccopharyngeal fascia. Posteriorly, alar fascia. The space between this is retropharyngeal space. This space is further divided by a fibrous septum into two spaces of Gillette. The content of this space is Rubier lymph node. We talked about this in the last class. Okay. So, what is retropharyngeal abscess? Is nothing but collection of pus in the retropharyngeal space. It is divided into acute and chronic. Acute retropharyngeal abscess is seen in children commonly. Chronic is seen in adults. So, what causes this acute retropharyngeal abscess? Acute retropharyngeal abscess is common in children, usually seen between 3 to 5 years. Why this occurs only in children? Because this Rubier lymph nodes regresses in the later age of childhood. So, if this Rubier lymph node gets infected, it causes acute retropharyngeal abscess. So, etiology is suppuration of the retropharyngeal lymph node of Rubier from the upper respiratory tract infection. Because the commonest infection in under 5 age group is upper respiratory tract infection followed by acute diarrheal diseases. You have to remember that. Okay. So, any upper respiratory tract infection, if this involves the Rubier's node, it can lead into suppuration in the retropharyngeal space. And other causes are penetrating trauma of the posterior pharyngeal wall through the oral cavity. If there is any penetrating injury, either due to a fishbone or due to any sharp objects, it can cause retropharyngeal abscess. Iatrogenically, when you are doing endoscopy, if you traumatize the postpharyngeal wall, it can also cause retropharyngeal abscess. Rarely, acute mastoiditis, the pus may trickle into the retropharyngeal space. Very rare. Now coming to symptoms. Obviously, the patient has pre-existing symptoms of upper respiratory tract infection. Apart from this, dysphagia, that is difficulty in swallowing due to obstruction. Odynophagia, that is painful swallowing. Patient has difficulty in breathing, that is dyspnea. You have to know these terms. Dyspnea, okay? Dyspnea. Croupy cough. Hot potato voice. Hot potato voice you get in two conditions. Retropharyngeal abscess, parapharyngeal abscess, and also quinsy, that is peritonsillar abscess. The examiner may ask you, where do you find hot potato voice? And also neck stiffness, because this space is closely related to the posterior spaces. It can also cause neck stiffness. What are the signs the patient presents with? Febrile, toxic looking, that is ill looking, child with drooling, tender neck swelling, with or without fistula, torticollis, that is tilted to one side. one side on the side of the abscess. If the abscess is on the right side, the patient presents in this position with hyperextension of the neck like this. Okay. When you see the oral cavity, sometimes you can find a bulge in the posterior pharyngeal wall like this. Look at this bulge. Okay. If you do an endoscopy, you can find this is the epiglottis. These are the vocal cords. This is the base of tongue. When you do an oral endoscopy looking downwards, you can find this swelling. This is the posterior pharyngeal wall swelling. You can see in it retropharyngeal abscess. So, what other investigations you can go for? Lateral neck X-ray. If there is prevertebral, that is before the vertebrae, if there is any soft tissue widening, then it is significant. So, how much widening is significant if you want to know, right? So, if at the level of C2 itself, if there is widening of greater than 7 millimeters, then you can diagnose it as retropharyngeal abscess. At the level of C6, it should be at least 14 to 22 millimeters, depending upon the age. Okay. So, prevertebral soft tissue widening is an important diagnostic feature for retropharyngeal abscess. Along with there is a homogeneous, that is same, equally spread prevertebral shadow, homogeneous prevertebral shadow, which is the width is greater than 50% of the width of the vertebral body. I'll show you, don't worry. Okay. Sometimes you can see the air fluid levels like in any abscess, and there is also straightening of cervical spine due to spasm of the prevertebral muscles. See, this is the lateral neck X-ray. There is a prevertebral widening of the soft tissue. See, this is the soft tissue. You can see this is the airway. This is a trachea. Okay. There is prevertebral widening. This is the one side. And in neck there is a curvature like this, but there is loss of curvature in, that is the vertebrae are straight. Straightening of the vertebra. This is because whenever there is irritation of the prevertebral and paravertebral muscles or spinal muscles, they go into spasm. Whenever they go into spasm, the spine straightens. That is what is happening. Sometimes you can find the air fluid level here. So you can see air fluid level. See, this is the airway. This is the pharyngeal and esophageal tract. See, this is the soft tissue. This is the pharynx. Look at the soft tissue wire. Okay, and you see the vertebrae. They are in a straight line. The curvature is lost. These are the classical signs for retropharyngeal abscess. In CT, these are the axial sections. You can see retropharyngeal abscess more on the right side here. Here is almost both sides are gone. Okay. So how do you treat this case? Like in any case, antibiotics, incision and drainage. Antibiotics, incision and drainage. So in acute cases, what you do is you keep the patient in the supine position, preferably in the rose position, like doing tonsillectomy, and give the incision over the bulge that is present in the posterior pharyngeal wall. And you evacuate the pus. Then you give antibiotic. If the patient has any difficulty in breathing or stridor, you go for tracheostomy. I'm trying to show you a video. You can see the bulge, right? This is the uvula. This is the epiglottis. You are seeing through the oral cavity. So I'm sorry, I'm unable to play the video. Okay, I'm unable to show the video where the abscess is drained. I'll show it to you in the next class. Okay, there is some trouble with this. You can see me, right? You can see me and hear me, right? Okay. Now coming to chronic retropharyngeal abscess. So the etiology differs. The chronic retropharyngeal abscess mostly seen in adults. Here the main etiology is caries spine. Caries spine is nothing but tuberculosis of the spine. It presents a central posterior pharyngeal wall swelling. In acute retropharyngeal abscess, it is present on right side or left side. That is slightly on either side of the midline. But in caries spine, the swelling is central. Okay. So how does infection occur? The tubercle infection of the retropharyngeal lymph nodes occurs from the gets spread from the deep cervical lymph nodes. Deep cervical lymph nodes. Okay, and other causes are post-traumatic, that is due to vertebral fracture, and rarely spread from pre-existing parapharyngeal abscess. So since it is chronic, the symptoms will be less. Presence with mild dysphagia, absence of pain, bulge in the posterior pharyngeal wall. The investigations include the same, that is lateral neck X-rays, CTs, all the blood workup should be done in this case also. You aspirate the pus and you send for Ziehl-Neelsen staining to confirm the tuberculosis. See, this how the X-ray findings, how it differs from the acute is, you can see the homogeneous shadow here, but there is no air fluid level. No air fluid level. Okay, in that way, they can die. And also, addition to that, if the causes tuberculosis of cervical spine, you can also find the damage or necrosis or destruction of the vertebral bodies. So treatment include, if it is, as it is mostly due to tuberculosis, we will go for ATT, anti-tuberculous therapy. And if there is any acute supraarterial infection, then you will go for antibiotics. So these abscess can be two types: low abscess, low retropharyngeal abscess, and high abscess. If it is a low abscess, the incision is given along the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. If it is a high abscess, it is given on the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So if we leave it untreated, it can cause airway obstruction, spread to other spaces. Spontaneous rupture of the abscess can cause aspiration, septicemia, and ultimately, in some cases, death. This is the sequel. Now coming to parapharyngeal abscess. So parapharyngeal space extends from the base of the skull to up to the level of the hyoid bone. Okay, skull base to the hyoid bone. Medially, it is related to soft palate, superior constrictor, tonsil. Laterally, is related to pterygoids, medial pterygoid and lateral pterygoid. Deep muscle of the parotid, and finally ramus of the mandible. These are the lateral relations. Okay. Posteriorly prevertebral fascia and anteriorly pterygomandibular raphe. Okay. Anteriorly pterygomandibular raphe, posteriorly prevertebral fascia. These are the boundaries of parapharyngeal space, that 2 in number on either side of the pharynx. See, these are the boundaries of the parapharyngeal space. The parapharyngeal space is further divided into pre-styloid compartment and post-styloid compartment by styloid process with its 3 muscles and ligaments. Now, these together they are known as styloid apparatus. Okay. So styloid process with its 3 muscles and 2 ligaments divides the parapharyngeal space into pre-styloid and post-styloid compartments. The contents of pre-styloid compartment, the important ones are deep lobe of the parotid, internal maxillary artery, internal inferior ulnar nerve, lingual nerve, auriculotemporal nerve, lymph nodes. The post-styloid compartments contains internal carotid artery, internal jugular vein, 4 cranial nerves, sympathetic chain, glomus system, and finally lymph nodes. Now coming to etiology. So what are the cause of this infection in this space? The most common causes are acute tonsillitis, pre-existing peritonsillar abscess, dental infection, mostly of the lower last molar, rarely Bezold's abscess, nothing but a mastoid abscess, and spread from other neck spaces like parotid, retropharyngeal, and submandibular spaces. Rarely direct penetrating injuries into the parapharyngeal space. So, what are the clinical features? Same as in any abscess: fever, sore throat, rhinophagia, torticollis. If the anterior compartment is involved, the anterior compartment, this is the anterior compartment, this is the posterior compartment. The anterior compartment is involved, the abscess pushes the tonsil medially. So, the tonsil is pushed medially. Okay. If this is the mandible, these are pterygoid muscles. If these pterygoid muscles are involved, what happens? These help in opening and closing of the jaw. So when these are inflamed, what happens? The patient has difficulty in opening the mouth. That is trismus. Okay, and neck swelling behind the angle of the mandible. If the posterior compartment is involved, there will be medial bulge behind the posterior pillar of the tonsil. That is, see, this is the anterior pillar. This is the posterior pillar. This is the posterior space. This abscess causes bulge posterior to the tonsil. Okay. Okay. And paralysis of 9, 10, 11 Vagal nerve and sympathetic chain. These are the nerves. If they get involved, there will be paralysis. Okay. Now coming to CT. These are axial cuts showing parapharyngeal space. Okay. This is the thyroid cartilage. This is the airway of the larynx. It is present post. This is the para. This is the pharynx. Parapharyngeal space. Treatment include antibiotics, incision, and drainage. But where do you give incision? The incision is transcervical, that is external. A horizontal incision made 3 centimeters below the angle of the mandible. Okay, this is usually done in general anesthesia. Why we don't prefer transoral drainage? Because it is to prevent injury to the carotid artery and internal jugular vein. So if you want to drain it transorally, you can injure these structures. Okay. If there is any airway obstruction or trismus, we'll go for tracheostomy. So this is the incision for parapharyngeal space. 3 centimeters below the angle of the mandible or at the level of, see, this is the hyoid bone, just below the level of the hyoid. This is hyoid. Just below the level of the hyoid bone. To prevent injury to the facial artery that curves around the angle of the mandible. If you give an incision here, you can injure this facial artery. So we'll do little below. Now coming to peritonsillar abscess or quinsy, we have discussed while in the tonsil itself, while discussing about acute tonsillitis, but again I'll repeat it here. So peritonsillar space is nothing but a potential space lateral to the tonsillar capsule and superior constructor muscle. If this space is filled with pus, then it is known as peritonsillar abscess. Pathology contains mixed aerobic and anaerobic organisms. Acute tonsillitis, if there is blockage of crypts, it leads to intratonsillar abscess, peritonsillitis, and peritonsillar abscess. Other name for peritonsillar abscess is quinsy. There is rare condition where can also cause peritonsillar abscess, involvement of Weber's salivary gland. This Weber's salivary gland is a minor salivary gland. It is present in the peritonsillar space, usually superiorly. When this gets infected, it can also cause peritonsillar space abscess or quinsy. Okay. Symptoms include fever, odynophagia, halitosis, hot potato voice or muffled voice. The paratonsillar area is swollen. The unilateral tonsil appears to be hypertrophied. It is usually not hypertrophied unless it contains acute tonsillitis, and it is pushed medially and congested. The ipsilateral jugulo-digastric inflows are ipsilateral involved. They may be trismus and torticollis. Okay. See this pulse. The tonsil is pushed medially. Okay. Tonsil is pushed medially, and the uvula is pushed to the opposite side. Uvula is pushed to the opposite side. See, this is the peritonsil. The uvula is pushed to the opposite side. So the diagnosis is by, there is a bulge, you put a needle, aspirate. If it has pus, the diagnosis is confirmed. We'll send this pus for culture and sensitivity. It requires admission, IV fluids, IV antibiotics, and betadine darters. But so this is how you aspirate. you mark a point where this maximum bulge will insert a needle and aspirate. So as anywhere we have to drain this abscess. We'll draw a horizontal line along the base of the uvula, a vertical line along the anterior pillar. The point where it meets, just lateral to it, we give an incision for drainage. This is Quincke forceps. Quincke forceps. It has a sharp end. We'll pierce it and we'll open. While opening it, the mouth of the abscess is widened and the pus drains out. Alternatively, if there is more bulge at one area, there also give you incision. Once you give the incision superficially, you should not poke the blade inside. Once you give the superficial incision, we'll take a sinus forceps. We introduce the forceps and open it like it is shown in the picture, and we evacuate the pus. After this, we give antibiotic. So when to do the tonsillectomy? Usually we want to wait for 4 to 6 weeks post the resolution of the symptoms. This is known as interval tonsillectomy. But if you want to do in the same sitting after draining the abscess, it is known as hot tonsillectomy. But it is usually avoided because there is no chance of bleeding and systemic infection, that is septicemia. So if you don't treat at this stage, it can cause paropharyngeal abscess, retropharyngeal abscess, laryngitis, laryngeal edema, rarely lung abscess, internal jugular vein thrombosis, and ultimately septicemia. But it is very rare because most of the patients before coming to the doctor itself, they use antibiotics. The infection usually resolves at this stage. Now coming to parotid abscess. So what is parotid space? Parotid space is a space that is formed by splitting of the investing layer of the deep fascia around the parotid salivary gland. See, this is the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. This black one is the parotid gland. It contains branches of external carotid artery, retromandibular vein, and this facial nerve. This facial nerve divides the parotid gland into superficial lobe and deep lobe. Okay. The content of this parotid space is lymph nodes. Lymph nodes. Parotid lymph nodes. So how does the infection occur in this space? Ascent of the infection, ascent of the bacterial infection, most commonly caused by Staphylococcus, Haemophilus, and Streptococcus, to a dehydrated parotid gland along the parotid duct from the oral cavity. So one of the etiology is infection spreading through the parotid duct into the parotid gland. Okay. The second one is suppuration of the intraparotid lymph nodes. So the intraparotid lymph nodes, if they are involved, they can cause parotid abscess. And the other one is spread of infection from the external auditory canal. External auditory canal is in close proximity with the parotid gland. How? Through the cartilaginous fissures of Santorini and bony foramen of Puschke. In external auditory canal, the cartilaginous part has minute gaps. These are known as fissures of Santorini. In bony external auditory canal, there are foramens known as Puschke. Through this, the external auditory canal infections can spread to parotid. Sometimes parotid infection can spread into the external auditory canal. Okay. So what are the causes of parotid dehydration? Post-operative patient. Excessive use of antihistaminics, tricyclic antidepressants, barbiturates, diuretics, and parasympathomimetics can cause parotid dehydration, which is a prerequisite for parotid abscess. So patients present with pain in induration over the parotid area. Okay. The parotid area, if there is pictic edema, it differentiates the parotid abscess from simple parotitis. Okay. In parotid abscess, if you press the parotid area, you can see the pus coming from the parotid duct. It is usually located parallel to the second upper molar. See, this is the papilla where the parotid duct opens. Investigations into complete blood picture, needle aspiration, ultrasound. Ultrasound also reveals the presence of the abscess. Rarely you can go for CT and MRI if required. In CT, you can clearly see this is the parotid gland. This is the contrast CT. That's why there is enhancement. Enhancement means more prominence. Wherever there is more vascularity, there will be the contrast goes there and there will be more prominence. It is prominent here because abscess means there is inflammation. Where there is more inflammation, it enhances. You can see this is parotid abscess. And this is parotid abscess in MRI. How do we differentiate between CT and MRI? CT uses X-rays. X-rays, bone appears white. MRI shows prominently the soft tissue. See, the bone is very less prominent here. That is one way to differentiate between the CT and MRI. So treatment include IV fluids, IV antibiotics, incision and drainage. How and placing the drain. So this is the Blair's incision or S-shaped incision. Initially, what you do, you do an S-shaped incision, raise the flaps, identify the parotid, identify the branches of the facial nerve. You don't want to injure the branch of the facial nerve, and give an incision over the capsule of the parotid and drain the abscess, and ultimately keep a lumbar drain. These are the steps for draining the parotid abscess. So what is the care you have to take? You have to take care that you give the incision parallel to the branch of the facial nerve, and you don't want to transect the facial nerve, and parallel to the duct. Those things you have to keep in mind. So these are the important spaces. We discussed about parotid space, submandibular space, peritonsillar space, retropharyngeal space. Danger spaces present posterior to the retropharyngeal space between the alar fascia and prevertebral fascia. Okay. The source of infection in this space is retropharyngeal abscess, tuberculosis spine, and penetrating trauma. Importance of this space is the infection of this space can enter the posterior mediastinum and cause mediastinitis, which is a fatal infection. We have discussed, and prevertebral space. Prevertebral space extends from skull to the coccyx. It is present between the prevertebral fascia and vertebral bodies. So infection in this space can trickle from the base of the skull to the coccyx, but it does not involve the posterior mediastinum. Okay. Masticator space. Masticator space is a space between the skull to the lower border of the mandible. Okay. The source of infection for this space is second and third molar. So the incision for draining this masticator abscess is below the angle of the mandible. See, this is the incision for masticator space. You do the incision and drain the abscess. So these are the few important abscesses in the neck, which are very important for your exams also, which are very important for your coming internals also. So start reading it today. If you have any doubts, you can email me. Do you have any doubts now? If you have any, please message me in the chat box. Is everyone ready for the examination? Please reply. Are you hearing the class or you slept? Hello. Very good. You're ready for the exam, right? Good. I'm stressing it because there is high chance for you to get this question in your final exams also, because it's a favorite topic of your examiners. So read these abstracts thoroughly. You need to know from A to Z. You may even get an essay on this. Most commonly you get 4 marks, but sometimes they may ask you to enumerate the spaces and talk about one abscess. So this is very important. Okay, you read this today. If you have any doubt, you email me. I'll do what I can and I'll explain them in the next class. Okay, either you can mail me or give your doubts to your CR. He'll message me. I'll cover them in the next class. The next topic is we'll deal with benign lesions. Actually, this comes under nose and nasopharynx as well, but I'll deal with this for you. We'll talk about juvenile nasal angiofibroma in the next class. Okay. If you want any other topics to be covered, you email me. Once I finish juvenile nasal angiofibroma and nasopharyngeal carcinoma, I'll deal with all the miscellaneous things in the last class. So make sure that you note it down now and give me a list so that I'll cover whatever. If I left anything, I'll cover it in the last class. Okay. So do you have any doubts or should I conclude the class? Shall I close? No. Till today, as far as my topics are concerned, for examination, the syllabus will be till today only. That is, neck abscesses you will have for the exam, not JNA. Okay then. You read. If you have any doubts, you message me. Okay then. Thank you.